Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, thank you so much for being here on, well, a day that will go down in the history books.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just start with what it was like to bear witness to this Republican fracture firsthand on the floor of Congress. How did you leave the chamber today?
You know, I was honestly surprised. I did not think that Kevin McCarthy was going to have the votes in the first round, but I didn't think that it was going to be as catastrophic for him as it actually was. I think one of the things that we saw was, we saw that there were reports of there being up to 20 holdouts on the Republican side, except usually in the 24 to 48 hours before a vote, there are a lot of negotiations that happen, and Kevin McCarthy was engaging in some of those negotiations in order to bring that.
Oh, also, liberals got really mad at me for saying Democrats are so fucking incompetent that they didn't, keep running the clock out, as though I don't understand. I don't understand that, it still continues even if you adjourn. Hey, man, I know that. But, when you adjourn, you give them time to fucking recoup and regroup and basically make backdoor concessions. I don't want that to happen. I want this fucking circus show to continue for as long as possible. I don't give a fuck if you're bored or tired, okay? Do your goddamn job. Let him fucking sweat. It's so silly. Also, they adjourned right before evening news and prime time. It was so weird that, people were just, yelling at me. They openly stated they want Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity to whip the votes for them. The more they're stuck in that fucking, in the halls, the harder it gets to whip those votes. I want them to literally not be able to whip the fucking votes.
That number down. Now, I didn't think he was going to have the vote at all, but we at least thought that that number would be less. But to get into the high teens, in nearly 18, 19 members refusing to support his speakership is an astonishingly high number. And I think it very much speaks to the lack of faith among elected Republicans that they have in Kevin McCarthy's speakership. And for him to have several months since the November elections and still not be able to clinch it, I think is very much a testament to a lack of leadership.
This also signals to everyone what we already knew, right? This was the easiest lock. If you're even a little bit familiar with American politics, if you're even a little bit familiar with the Republican Party and how it operates, especially in the House of Representatives, you would know that they were 1,000,000% going to do this. They were going to have issues whipping votes when they have such a slim majority in the House of Representatives for any kind of fucking package, any kind of bill that they have, because the Tea Party, which they did this even under Donald Trump, will absolutely run the conversation.
And it is very surprising to see that, but in the contrast on the Democratic side, we didn't have a single defection. And that unity is very much going to help us in, hopefully being able to secure some procedural wins and take advantage of certain moments.
And I definitely want to return to that topic in terms of the Democratic unity and the conversations that have been happening inside the caucus. But it did not go unnoticed, shall we say, on the internet and elsewhere, that you were on the floor having some conversations with Republicans, including Matt Gaetz and Paul Gosar. Can you enlighten us at all as to what those conversations were like? And is there any hope that you guys work together to get Hakeem Jeffries elected as Speaker of the House?
I think in chaos, anything is possible, especially in this era. It is unlikely, but there's always a possibility. I do think that in terms of some of those conversations, listen, some of us in the House of Representatives are independent in certain ways from our party. And I do believe that in some of those conversations, there are things that are happening on the floor. These machinations are happening on the floor. And sometimes the leadership of your party, in this case, the Republican Party, will be making claims in order to try to twist arms and get people in line. And a lot of times, information and truth is currency. So sometimes to be able to fact check some of the claims that McCarthy is making, whether Democrats are going to defect or not, et cetera, is important in order to keep him honest and to keep people honest in general. And so, I think what was important today was to send the message that we were united behind Hakeem Jeffries as the now minority leader, or as leader of the Democrats, and that there would be no defections, that Democrats are here, we're not going anywhere, and if they want to play ball, we're open to that. That's
going to make a lot of people, I think, on one side of the aisle very happy and a lot of people on the other side of the aisle very concerned. Is it your sense that there is a plan that the Freedom Caucus has? I mean, there's a real question about who's driving who's running the operation here, who's driving the bus. Is it Kevin McCarthy or is it, Andy Biggs and Paul Gosar and Matt Gaetz?
Well, I think one of the central challenges here is that in Kevin McCarthy's speaker run, within the Republican caucus, there was no number two. The Republican caucus did not really have a full-throated race for speaker. There was no challenger in the last 2 months that has emerged, and I do believe that that is the central Republican problem. Whether McCarthy pulls this through or not, the core concern here is who would ascend to that seat. I do not believe that Kevin McCarthy has the votes. I believe that a lot of the opposition to him is very personal. I believe his leadership style is incompatible with a lot of Republican members and certainly the Democratic caucus. And so I think that is the central question. If not him, then who? You have certain members of the Freedom Caucus who have, of course, nominated other people, but the rest of the Republican Party will not rally, I believe. They will not coalesce under Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan himself doesn't want it. They will not coalesce under someone like Andy Biggs. And so the question is there anyone in their caucus that can build that consensus? If there isn't, McCarthy's team may have to come to the Democratic Party. And if that's the case, then what would that even look like? It's rather unprecedented. Could it result in a potential coalition government? Could we get Democratic chairs of committees as a result? We don't know. But ultimately,
What do you think of the force to vote people using this as proof they were right? I mean, I hate to admit this because it usually gets all the fucking cranks in here to yell at me, but like, if anything, this literally shows that they were wrong. And it doesn't, I mean, you're not going to be able to like actually get them to recognize that because they are more so just motivated by, they're just motivated by like wanting to feel like they're right and just the anger that they feel. This is literally a perfect demonstration of why forced to vote would be stupid. I mean, we called this. Like, what they wanted to do was put a Medicare for all bill on the floor. Like, that was one of the concessions that they wanted, which would have gotten eviscerated. What would voting on Medicare for all done? I still haven't seen an actual adult answer this basic question. Lamau, Biden ran as an anti-Medicare for all candidate and he won. Like, what were they even talking about? Exactly. And at the time I told you, like, if that concession came through, all it would have showed to like everyone in the fucking media, especially after Joe Brandon won as the anti-Medicare for all candidate, all it would have shown for people was proof that like no one wants this. No one wants this. Americans don't want this. When Americans do, as a matter of fact, want it. Like, it would have been a horrible way to advocate for Medicare for all. You know what I mean? To put them on the record, I know, but like we already know that they don't want that shit. Like we know. Joe Brandon very much said he was on the record when he said he's running against like Medicare for all. They are on the record. They're very much on the record already.
What we saw here today is that in the last 2 months and now, Kevin McCarthy failed to unite his caucus and failed to even, I think he failed to respect the power of the Freedom Caucus enough as well. They are members of his party in order to build that coalition together. He failed as a coalition builder not once, not twice, but 3 times. And we reconvene tomorrow morning. And I'm not quite sure what he could or would do that would change the calculus between today and tomorrow.
Nope.
And that's a huge question. We know that
well, we know that there's not really much he could do, and he hasn't. And the more this goes on, the more he hemorrhages support, which is fucking awesome. Okay? Absolutely dope.
Ultimately, 7,000 boxes of pizza were delivered to McCarthy's office, which suggests it's going to be a long night of negotiating. You suggested that Democrats are open to any overtures from McCarthy's office. Have there been any? Are you at liberty to say whether there are even preemptive conversations going on?
No, I think open is a generous term. I'm not saying necessarily that our party is signaling in openness just yet, but really it's about the cards that are in McCarthy's hands. And if he chooses to approach the Democratic caucus, then that would be a negotiation in and of itself for potential coalition government. But again, this is very much an unprecedented time. In your opening, you discussed what happened in 1855. The last time this happened was in 1923. And so we really have not seen many times in American history. And it is not a coincidence that they are times of division, times of extraordinary strife, disenfranchisement, and inequality. And I think that these are things that the Republican caucus is very much contending with. I also want to note that some of the requests made by these Republican holdouts are also small d Democratic in nature in terms of the rules of the House. Over a very long period of time, the concentration of power in the House of Representatives has concentrated to an extraordinary amount in party leadership of both parties. And what we see from the House Freedom Caucus is their attempt, however guided, misguided, destructive, constructive, whatever your perspective is, they are making attempts to reform the rules of the House in a way that would dilute McCarthy or the Speaker's power. And
this part is also kind of true as well, but they're just doing it for nefarious purposes. They're doing it for nefarious reasons, but
elevate the power of of individual members in the House. And that, I think, is an essential crux that is part of the rub here in their inability to create an agreement. So, if McCarthy really wants this, he really needs to look at how he can get to the 218 that he needs. And you got to find that math somewhere. If you can't get those votes from the House Freedom Caucus, and he has provided many, many, many concessions, and it's just not working out.
I got to ask you, getting concessions from leadership can be done in many ways. And the House Republican Freedom Caucus has chosen a pretty public and fractious way to gain concessions. What happened on the Democratic side of the aisle in terms of this unbelievable unity in a very big tent party? I mean, what was the conversation like between parts of the Democratic Party that are much further left, much more progressive than some of this more centrist leadership, and in particular?
Yeah, I mean, Nancy Pelosi is a significantly better whip. We've talked about this before. As a matter of fact, that's kind of what makes her so evil and so awful as a politician. If we're thinking about it in terms of helping the American population, and meeting their needs or demands, right? But she is a very good whip. She's a very good fundraiser, and she's a very good whip. And she whipped the shit out of the fucking party. It was like out of the question.
Hakeem Jeffries, the new leader. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that are happening right now. One is that in order for us to take advantage of the fracturing on the Republican side, we have to operate as a full entire bloc. This margin is extraordinarily slim. We're talking about a margin of 4 votes.
Yeah, they want committee positions. Matt Gaetz wants the chair of Armed Services Subcommittee. Representative Andy Harris wants to head the Appropriations Subcommittee on Health and Human Services. 4 out of 9 Rules Committee seats to be hardline conservatives. That's like what they're looking for. Yeah, they want committee positions on top of like other things that they've asked for, concessions that they've asked for. I mean, hey, they're playing fucking hardball, baby. They're playing hardball. They're playing politics.
Votes. And so if they get to a point where they lose 4 or 5 votes and we stay 100% united, then there are possibilities where if it's not this vote, it could be other votes. There are procedural moments in the House where you can prevent, in their case, catastrophic legislation from coming to the floor if we remain united. I think some of these conversations coming forward is an acknowledgement of the severity of this point in history. We are talking about a very real danger in a Republican-controlled House. And that could mean that a very narrow, slim margin of 4 to 5 votes could have implications on whether we can raise a debt ceiling. It could have implications even on the 2024 election. And January 6th was all about the refusal to certify every state's election results. And it is no secret that Republicans have indicated that there are several who are willing to do it again. They are willing to reject certification of a presidential election if they do not like the results. And I believe that on the Democratic side, the acknowledgement of how fragile our democracy is in this moment is a critical part to that unity. We absolutely have differences, but I think a willingness to put that aside in order to figure out how we can navigate and exploit some of these major moments to advance really the issues of working people, raise wages, protect health care, and really defend a lot of the gains that we have made in the last 2 to 3 years. It's going to be very critical.
Yeah, it's so important to underscore the fact that the last time this happened beyond 1923 was the eve of the Civil War, and it really does feel like an inflection point in terms of major social issues, race, identity, the whole lot. No one knows.
Yeah, last time this happened, the parties were not as united internally, okay? Party lines back in the day in the United States of America were more aligned with, they were not as aligned, okay, as they are now. This is something that you need to understand. This is something that I briefly mentioned in the beginning of the broadcast as well. Back in the day, you had Republicans in the North that were more progressive, and you had Democrats in the South that were more racist and significantly, more conservative. Parties back in the fucking day, literally, or legislators back in the day, cared more about their internal constituency, their immediate geopolitical struggles, significantly more than just towing the party line. This was why there was a lot of struggle internally within parties. Okay, I'm not even just talking about the party ideology changing, because that is a very hyper simplistic way of looking at it. Like the Democratic Party became the woke party, the Republican Party is no longer the woke party, is actually a very simplistic way of looking at it. Okay, it didn't just like flip. That is, it's a reductive way to look at it. It's a simplistic way to look at it. It's not wrong, okay? It's not completely wrong to say that, but it was way more complicated than that, okay? So somebody on ABC earlier said this reminded them of January 6th. It does, but in the funniest way possible. This actually does remind me of January 6th. Why? Because it's disruptive in the funniest way, because it's like disrupting a symbolic thing that you have to do. You know what I mean? It's like it's totally just like it's totally just a symbolic thing. Like, oh, who the Speaker of the House is going to be, like voting for that. Like everybody fucking knows who's going to be. Right? Whereas it's like goalless, okay? It's just pure mania. It's being done to disrupt a purely symbolic function of the government. It is identical. It is identical in that regard, okay? Less chaotic, less death, but overall, it's kind of similar in that regard. Like, January 6th was aimless when you think about it. I said it at the time. What, you think if they stopped the votes from being officially certified by the vice president that, like, all of a sudden Trump was going to be the president? No. That was never going to happen, right? Like, if they were successfully able to stop the process, which they did, what, you think Americans were going to magically go, oh, well, I guess they didn't certify the results? No, it was pure symbolic. It was like a bullshit thing that they have to do. And this is pretty much identical to that. No matter what happens, no matter whether it's Jim Jordan or Byron Donalds or whoever the fuck you want to put forward as the new Speaker of the House, even if it's not Kevin McCarthy, the function of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives is not going to fundamentally change. It's going to be the exact same thing, no matter who the fucking Speaker of the House is. So you're basically just like delaying that process. Okay? That's it. That's it. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. It's Hunter Biden dick pics committees. It's going to be fucking Hunter laptop, January 6th committees, impeach Joe Biden. That's it. That's it. So let him fight.
Knows what's going to happen. We are so deeply grateful for your time, Congresswoman Alexander.
So I personally love this this chaos.
Very specific about never bringing a vote to the floor, whether it was a leadership vote or a vote to pass a bill, unless she knew it could pass. Not just because it would be a bad look for her as the speaker, but because it doesn't show us as a legislative body doing our job when it's all over C-SPAN and then it's all over the newspapers. So I hope that they're able to come to some kind of a conclusion. I don't think that they should rely on Democrats to bail them out. Because certainly if the shoe were on the other foot, that would never happen. I think it behooves the Republicans to come together and to maybe put a little of their, ideological intransigence aside and recognize that they work for the people. They don't work for themselves. And for some stupid rule change that, they're looking for. So that's my hope that they, if they do the motion to adjourn, that they need all the Republicans on, at least most of them on board to get that done. And then hopefully maybe there'll be a vote later on tonight. Probably not. I would think it's probably tomorrow. But we'll see. Hopefully they'll be able to make some ground. But today doesn't make one hopeful that that's going to happen.
Well, we are kind of holding on to hope. I mean, if anything, Kathleen, it's been very contentious since yesterday. And we have learned a number of things, a lot about.
Bro, you know what this is? I hate to be super libbed up here, but this basically is Ron Swanson in Parks and Recreation, okay? A libertarian who is working in this like local government position who internally tries to disrupt the process, right? That is exactly what these guys are doing. I mean, that character is written off of guys like this. You have these fucking weirdo right-wing conservatives who are like, I'm a part of the government because I want the government not to work. Okay? So that's what they're doing. It's what they would do regardless of who the fucking Speaker of the House is. And this is an opportunity for them to basically, yes, as you correctly called out, commit political arson. Because like they have no genuine worldview. They have no political aspirations. The goal is just to basically hold, block, push, and farm their fucking donors. Also, maybe I wasn't fucking wrong yesterday. I hope all the libtards that got mad at me will shut the fuck up. Email from the new House Democratic Whip Catherine Clark advises members to vote no on a potential Republican motion to adjourn. If Republicans want more time to debate McCarthy's survival, they'll need to come up with these votes themselves. Thank you. So maybe I wasn't so fucking stupid. Maybe my observation was astute. Maybe I know what the fuck I'm talking about, libtards. Shut the fuck up. No, lock him in. Lock him in. Make it as hard as possible for them to fucking gain concessions, to make concessions. Make it hard for them to actually fucking run around and whip votes. Make it hard for them to wait for the Tucker Carlson broadcast to come out at night and Sean Hannity to do the whipping for them. One lib agrees with you and you start cussing out the people who pay your mortgage, thirsty himbo. Wait, what? No, it wasn't one liberal who agreed with me. I said that they should do this yesterday because I think that that was the smart thing to do. From colleague Tyler Olson, GOPers are expecting an adjourn after the sixth failed vote for Speaker. Needs a simple majority if they go to roll call vote, but they could also adjourn via unanimous consent or a voice vote. Lock them in. We made it to green text law? Wait, what? Anon copes even harder than the average Anon. Okay / poll. We too need a Chad-looking right-wing speaker like this F-word to red pill Zoomers. Almost every girl I know watches this socialist F-word. That's a really old, that's an old one. That's crazy. The comments are a mess. Ignore it. Yeah, the comments are basically saying that my elbows are too pointy. I scrolled through the comments of the green text comments, and it's like a litany of people being like, elbows too pointy, wouldn't hit, 0 out of 10. And then like people being like, he's a rich guy. He's rich. He's super rich. Which is always funny. It's like, thank you, I guess. I don't understand. Like I think I might be the only motherfucker on the planet who gets shit on by his haters who literally keep saying how fucking successful and wealthy he is.